Welcome everybody to another spooky iceberg. Last year I talked about the Friday the 13th iceberg, so it only makes sense to follow that up with the Nightmare on Elm Street iceberg. But this also means that I've already talked about some topics related to Elm Street, so if you want to see me talk about these topics, go check out the Friday the 13th iceberg. As always, if you like the video, drop a like and comment about your favorite entry. It costs absolutely nothing and helps me out a ton. But if you're insistent on helping me out financially, I do have channel membership options, so you can see videos early and get exclusive video previews. I'll also read your name out at the end of the video. Got plenty of icebergs already made and planned, so stay tuned. With all that being said, let's dream. That's stupid, I'm gonna cut the... Hey, sorry to bother you, but if you like the video, leave a like and comment below about your favorite entry. I know you skipped the intro, but this stuff is important and it costs you nothing. Alright, sorry to bother you. I'll let you get back to the video. Wes Craven's Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was originally supposed to be written by Wes Craven and Bruce Wagner. While they're still credited as the film's writers, most of their ideas would be dropped from the final film. This obviously means that their version of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was a lot different than the film that we ended up getting. Some of their ideas included Nancy not actually being a mentor figure in the film. She would also be dating Dr. Neal, who would have been much younger in this version of the film. Pretty much everything about Amanda Kruger's backstory wasn't in this version of the film. Joey and Roland would have been killed in the film. It would have also been made very explicit that the light in the model house at the end of the film was the spirit of Nancy watching over her friends. It would have also been revealed that the house seen in the character's nightmares wasn't actually the Elm Street house, but instead was the childhood home of Freddy, with the idea being that his house would be a portal to the dream realm. Freddy would have also talked a lot less in this version of the film. Overall, it was going to be a much darker film than we ended up getting. The reason why this script didn't end up being used was because of director Chuck Russell, as he believed that the series should be more wild and be almost like a carnival. Can Freddy enter the dreams of animals? So, animals can dream. So, does that mean that Freddy can enter an animal's dream? Maybe. This question is often asked because of the scene in the second film in which a bird is shown freaking out, killing another bird, and eventually exploding. People believe that Freddy entered this bird's dream and caused all of this mayhem because, right before this, it stated that the birds are asleep. So, case closed. The bird was attacked by Freddy in its dream. Right? Well, no, actually. Well, actually, no. In real life, miners would use birds in order to find out if a mine was safe to enter. If the bird came back, then it was all good. But if it didn't come back, it was assumed that the bird was killed by toxic fumes that were in the mine. So the idea here was that the bird sensed a presence in the house, that being Freddy, and its freakout was it unintentionally warning the family that the house wasn't safe. So while technically it is possible that Freddy can enter the dreams of animals, we haven't actually seen him do so. The bird seen from Nightmare 2 was actually just a bird sensing Freddy's presence, which I guess is enough to make it explode. Though you could also argue that the bird exploding was just another example of the dream realm and the real world blending together. Freddy Krueger isn't in New Nightmare. This is a really obvious entry for fans of the series, but for people who haven't seen the series, you might be surprised to learn that out of the 9 Elm Street films, Freddy only appears in 8 of them. 1994's New Nightmare is a very unique entry in the series. It's the 7th installment in the series in a total reboot. In this film, the previous 6 films are actually in-universe movies, with the plot of the film being that a 7th Nightmare on Elm Street film is being made, and the cast working on the film are being haunted by a demon. and this demon was somehow trapped by the Nightmare on Elm Street films existing. And since the series ended, he's now free to terrorize people, which is why they're even making a 7th film to begin with. Because of this, Freddy Krueger isn't actually the villain of the film. Instead, it's a demon who cosplays as Freddy Krueger in order to scare people. Cancelled remake sequel. 2010's Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the most hated horror reboots ever made. It's also considered the worst Nightmare on Elm Street film by a mile. Despite this, the film was actually extremely successful at the box office, making $117 million, which makes it the highest-grossing film in the series. So, with a financially successful slasher film, a sequel was greenlit. At least, maybe it was at some point. A sequel to the film was never actually publicly announced, and the only evidence for a sequel being considered is the fact that Jackie Earle Haley and Rooney Mara, Freddy and Nancy's actors, were signed on for multiple films, with Rooney being signed on for 2, while Jackie was signed on for 3. A sequel to the film most likely never ended up happening because of the first film's insanely massive critical failure, though a sequel to this film may have actually secretly happened. More on that in just a little bit. The origin behind the series. Wes Craven was inspired by a lot of different things when creating Nightmare on Elm Street. In the 1970s, many refugees from Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia fled to the United States due to these countries being in the middle of a war or a genocide. Wes Craven would then read in several newspapers around the time that some of these refugees had actually died in their sleep after they had refused to go to sleep due to nightmares caused by the horrors of what they saw in their home countries. To this day, it's not known how these people died, though it's believed by many that these may have been cases of Brugada syndrome. Regardless, this incident is what inspired the people being killed in their dreams part of Nightmare on Elm Street. Another piece of Nightmare on Elm Street's origin comes from Wes Craven's childhood. One day, when he was a kid, he was just chilling out in his house, when he suddenly saw an old man walking by an alley. The old man then randomly stopped, and just for a moment stared at Wes Craven, terrifying him. He then walked off. This old man served as partial inspiration for Freddy Krueger, according to Wes Craven. Finally, we have Freddy Krueger's name. Freddy's last name, Krueger, was actually taken from a kid who used to bully Wes Craven when he was in elementary school. Dead by Daylight. In October 2017, Freddy Krueger was added to the game Dead by Daylight. Given the nickname The Nightmare, Freddy was released as part of the game's 6th DLC chapter. Unlike some other licensed killers in Dead by Daylight, Freddy didn't come with a map based on his franchise, but he didn't come to the world of Dead by Daylight alone. Quentin Smith from the 2010 remake was brought into the game as well, as a survivor, which means that yes, Freddy's design in the game is based on the 2010 remake, instead of Robert Englund. This was very controversial when it was revealed, and while people aren't foaming out of their mouths about it these days, it's not exactly something that many Dead by Daylight fans are happy with. In fact, a lot of people didn't care for Quentin's design either, with Kyle Gallner, the actor who played him in the film, even saying on Twitter that the Quentin Smith in the game was like a goblin version of himself. This ultimately led to Quentin's design being updated in a patch. Anyways, back to Freddy. Freddy actually has the ability to bring people into the dream realm. Luckily for survivors, they can escape the dream realm in various ways, like using the new alarm clock item to wake you up, or simply have another player wake you up. The last thing that I'll mention here is that Freddy's appearance in the game has actually led to some players to speculate that Freddy's appearance in Dead by Daylight is actually a sequel to the 2010 film, as his description mentions Freddy's defeat at the end of the film, and how he decides to go after Quentin for revenge. And it's during this nightmare that both Freddy and Quentin get transported to the world of Dead by Daylight by the entity, the mysterious, entity responsible for bringing all of the killers and survivors to Dead by Daylight. Whether or not this description is considered canon in the Nightmare franchise is a mystery. And by mystery, I mean, no, obviously it's not considered canon. Deleted scenes. Not every scene that's filmed or thought up for a film gets put in the final cut. Here's a list of deleted scenes from every single Nightmare on Elm Street film, except Freddy vs. Jason, because I already talked about deleted scenes from that film in the Friday the 13th Iceberg. For the original Nightmare on Elm Street, originally we would have seen Glenn's body rise up from the bed after being sucked into it. There was supposed to be a scene in the dream realm in which Nancy is shown falling from a great height. Originally, the ending of the film would have had Freddy be the one driving the car that Nancy and friends were in. There was supposed to be a scene during the slumber party where Nancy and Glenn kiss. Nancy would then break away and tell him that she was going to bed. Tina's nightmare was supposed to be longer, in which Freddy would essentially chase Tina in a circle. During the scene in which Julius Caesar by Shakespeare is read in a classroom, one of the students was supposed to interrupt and make a joke about how California is the most high and palmy state. Finally, at the Dream Clinic, there was supposed to be a comedic scene where a doctor tells Nancy a joke, to which she tells the doctor her own joke. For Nightmare on Elm Street 2, originally, Lisa would have been the friend possessed by Freddy at the end of the film, instead of Carrie. The scene where Freddy drags one of his blades on Jesse's lips was supposed to be very different. Originally, Freddy was supposed to put the entire blade into Jesse's mouth. This was cut due to Jesse's actor, Mark Patton, not being okay with this. As for Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, during the scene in which Joey is attacked by the nurse, we would have seen the nurse literally transform into Freddy Krueger. She does turn into Freddy in the final film, but we would have actually seen the transformation. This on-screen transformation was cut because it was deemed too gross. And Taryn's death was supposed to be far more brutal, with her head exploding. As for Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, originally, Rick was supposed to survive the film, and he would have been Alice's twin brother, and there was supposed to be a dream sequence in which Alice would have dreamt about her father apologizing to her, only for him to then transform into Freddy. As for Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, originally, Greta's death was going to be even more gruesome. However, the MPAA weren't really cool with this, and requested that they make her death less brutal. And similar to Greta's death, Dan's death, where he, transforms, was going to somehow be even more gruesome, but then the MPAA stepped in again. As for Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, John Doe was originally supposed to be Jacob from the previous film. Alice from the previous film was also supposed to be in the film. There was supposed to be a scene in which Maggie has a dream in which she'd be playing tag as a kid with her dad, aka Freddy. Then in the real world, she would talk with her mom about how she hates birthdays. There was supposed to be a scene in which Tracy spars with Doc in preparation for fighting Freddy. And finally, John's first dream was supposed to be longer, with him seeing even more crazy versions of himself. As for Wes Craven's New Nightmare, there was supposed to be a scene in which Wes Craven would cut off his eyelids in order to stay awake. There was supposed to be a scene in which the demon confronts Robert Englund by having Robert dream that he's a fly in a spider web, and the spider is the demon. This was cut due to concerns about the film's budget, and not knowing if they could make the scene look good. Michael Berryman was originally going to cameo in the film as Wes Craven's limo driver. And finally, while not a deleted scene, Wes Craven wanted Johnny Depp to cameo in the film, but he never ended up asking Depp, only to find out after the film's release that Johnny Depp would have done it. And finally, as for Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, The film was originally supposed to begin with Freddy Krueger dying of his burns in the hospital. There was supposed to be a scene showing Freddy creating his clawed glove. You can actually see this scene in some trailers for the film. The final confrontation against Freddy was supposed to take place in an abandoned old church. Quentin would have been killed in this ending. And finally, originally, there was supposed to be a scene where Freddy kills some characters while they're playing Guitar Hero. This was cut out of fear that it would date the film. Mortal Kombat. In August of 2011, Freddy Krueger became the Mortal Kombat franchise's second guest character, and the first of many slasher villains to be added into the franchise. Freddy's appearance in the game was unfortunately modeled off of his appearance from the 2010 remake, and unlike the Terminator in MK11, there wasn't a classic skin for Freddy. Though, unlike the Terminator, Freddy was actually voiced by his original actor, and I'm not talking about Jackie Earle Haley. Yup, Robert Englund actually reprised his role as Freddy in the game, but only in a very limited manner. MK9 doesn't have the modern Mortal Kombat intro interactions, so Freddy doesn't really talk in the game. Instead, Robert Englund voices Freddy's laughs and grunts in the game, with the only line of dialogue being Freddy shouting "no." In order to be more efficient at battling the fighters of Mortal Kombat, Freddy was given a second clawed glove, so he's like Voldo from Soul Calibur. As expected, many of Freddy's moves and fatalities have references from his appearances in the films. As for his lore, Freddy was just minding his own business in the dream world until one day Shao Kahn showed up and began to steal souls from the dream realm. Freddy wasn't really cool with that, so he began to fight Shao Kahn, leading to Shao Kahn to rip Freddy into the real world, leading to Freddy being defeated. Wanting revenge, Freddy gets some demonic enhancements and goes after Shao Kahn, and this eventually leads to him killing him. The Mortal Kombat character Nightwolf would then send Freddy back into the dream realm, which he probably shouldn't have done, because Freddy just went back to killing people on Elm Street. Freddy would return to the Mortal Kombat franchise in Mortal Kombat Mobile. His design in the game is similar to his MK9 appearance, though he no longer has two clawed gloves. And in this game, you can actually have Freddy fight Jason Voorhees. Ready Player One. Freddy Krueger makes a very brief cameo in the film Ready Player One, despite not appearing in the book the film was based on. He only appears in a single scene where he's shown being killed by the character H, who uses a Halo assault rifle to kill him, while Duke Nukem watches. Funny enough, Freddy's design in the film is actually based on his Mortal Kombat design, as he has two clawed gloves like in the game. Chuck Russell on-set controversy. While Nightmare on Elm Street 3 is often considered one of the best films in the series, production on the film was a bit of an actual nightmare for some of the cast and crew. According to several cast members, the film's director, Chuck Russell, wasn't exactly the best person to work with, as he was very hostile on set, leading to there being a ton of tension on set. Notably, he was a bit hard on Patricia Arquette. This eventually ended, as according to Ken Sagos, the actor who played Roland, a crew member on the film walked into set one day and had a serious talk with Russell about how his behavior on set needed to change immediately. Some of his hostility may have come from the fact that the film was rushed into production and was behind schedule. With all that being said, many actors and crew members, including Sagos, have stated that Chuck was a great director, so I assume all of this hostility on set happened at the very beginning of production, and afterwards he chilled out a bit. The ending of the original film was Marge's dream. There's a theory that the ending of the original Nightmare on Elm Street film wasn't actually Nancy's dream, but instead Marge's. This is because it's mentioned in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 that Nancy's mom, Marge Simpson, died in her sleep. And we literally see Freddy killing Marge at the very end of the film. If this final scene was Nancy's dream, why would Freddy attack Marge? Nancy wasn't even around to see it. It only makes sense that this was Marge's dream, as she's the one who sees the Freddy-colored roof of the car, and she's the one who's attacked. Yes, the dream is mainly shown from Nancy's perspective, but this wouldn't be the first time that the film tricked its audience. Remember, the film had a false protagonist. While it's not confirmed, it does seem pretty likely that this theory is true. NES game. Released in October of 1990 and developed by Rare, A Nightmare on Elm Street for the NES is the most well-known Nightmare on Elm Street video game, and it's also the last Nightmare on Elm Street video game to ever be made. The game itself is a platformer that can be played with up to 4 players, and you play as teenagers trying to put an end to Freddy Krueger by finding his bones and burning them. So the game is like a combination between the first and third films in terms of its plot. But Freddy isn't the only monster that they have to fight, as Elm Street is filled to the brim with hostile cats, snakes, spiders, and dogs. And in the dream realm, you gotta deal with skeletons, ghosts, zombies, and various strange forms of Freddy, like him as a ghost, and him as just his head with legs. You enter the dream realm via the sleep meter. As you would expect, this meter shows how close you are to falling asleep, and if it fully drains, then, you sleep. It's always going down, though you can slow it by constantly moving or drinking some coffee that you find on the ground. Upon collecting all of the bones in a level, you have to face off against Freddy in a boss fight. After collecting every single bone in the game, you have to face off against Freddy one last time, and upon doing so, you save the day. Probably. He's probably gonna come back. The game received alright reviews at the time. Critics and players found the game to just be alright, better than your average licensed video game, and this reception has continued to the present day. Though it does have a cult following, this cult following resulted in a figure based on the NES Freddy being released in 2013. The original ending. The original ending to Nightmare on Elm Street was going to be pretty similar to the ending that we got, except for one major change. In the film, it's revealed that the final scene is a nightmare when Freddy shows up and grabs Marge. But in the ending that Wes Craven fought for, Freddy wouldn't show up, because the final scene wasn't going to be a nightmare. There wasn't supposed to be any tease that Freddy was alive, or any twist at all. Nancy would have won, and that was that. This ending didn't happen because New Line Cinema weren't happy with it, so they made a compromise with Craven. He could have a happy-ish ending, but he had to have a twist revealing that Freddy was still alive. Or, well, not alive, but you know what I mean? And so, that's what we ended up getting. Are the little girls real? In most of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, there's a small group of characters known as the Elm Street Girls. They're usually a group of little girls who sing the Freddy Krueger nursery rhyme. These characters are the center of a mystery, that being, are they even real? Like, are they hallucinations, entities from the dream realm, ghosts, or just normal kids? Well, we only see them in dream realm sequences, so we can rule out that they're living people. And you can't really hallucinate in the dream realm, so they can't be hallucinations. So we're left with 2 different options. They're either ghosts or entities from the dream realm. It seems like the ghost answer is probably the correct one, as it just makes more sense if these girls were ghosts. Namely, the ghosts of Freddy's victims, both warding people of Freddy while also being a way for Freddy to scare his victims. I guess they could be entities from the dream realm created by Freddy, but I think it just makes more sense if they're ghosts. I mean, we literally see the ghosts of Freddy's victims in both Dream Warriors and the Dream Master, so it makes perfect sense. Now, some have argued that the first group of Elm Street girls are actually just normal kids, due to the fact that the original ending for Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't supposed to be a nightmare, but that doesn't really matter because in the final film, they only appear in the dream realm, so, like, okay, that's a moot point. So long story short, yes, the Elm Street girls are real. They're just not alive. They're ghosts. Though, in the 2010 remake, they only appear in a flashback sequence, so I guess they're alive in this continuity. Or, well, were. The original script. The original script for Nightmare on Elm Street was pretty similar to the film that we ended up getting, minus a few major changes. For starters, the film was supposed to take place in Los Angeles, which is actually why the line about California being the most high and palmy state was cut out of the film. The setting of the film was changed in order to make Springwood more like your typical American town. You know, your typical American town that just so happens to have Venice Beach connected to it for some reason. Freddy was also supposed to be very different. Originally, his sweater was going to be red and yellow, and instead of blades on his glove, he would have fishing hooks. Freddy was also supposed to have a more skeleton-like appearance in the film, but this was changed due to it being deemed too expensive. Despite this, you can still see remnants of this idea on posters for the film. Finally, the original film was supposed to be gorier. For example, in the aftermath of Glenn's death, which is already pretty brutal, we would have seen his bones, hair, and other pieces of his body thrown from the bed alongside the blood. The gay debate in Nightmare 2. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is known for a couple of reasons. It's the one Nightmare sequel that never seems to get mentioned in future films. It was rushed out the door in terms of its development. And many people believe that this film is actually secretly about the film's protagonist, Jesse, coming to terms with being gay. This is due to a lot of reasons. For starters, there's a lot of homoeroticism in the film, like Coach Schneider. There's also some very sweaty wrestling, and there's even a fetish bar in the film. There's also the fact that Jesse is shown to be very close to his friend Gary. Freddy's also a bit suggestive with Jesse sometimes. Also, it wasn't publicly known at the time, but Jesse's actor, Mark Patton, was gay, so that definitely added to the gay subtext of the film. Though all of this was not actually intentional. The film's writer, David Chaskin, has said numerous times that he didn't write the film to be about Jesse accepting himself. In fact, he's argued that the only reason the film is perceived like this was because of Mark Patton and how he played Jesse, saying that Mark played Jesse, quote, too gay. But Mark Patton and even Robert Englund disagree with him. Patton has said that the film became pretty blatantly about Jesse being gay through the film's rewrites. In fact, he was actually pretty upset by this, because he wasn't publicly out yet, and so he felt like the people making the film were messing with him. Robert Englund has said before that he believes that the film is very blatantly a bisexual-themed film about Jesse debating on coming out or not, and this was used by Freddy to torment him, saying, quote, Part 2 has a really interesting bisexual psychological thing going for it. We didn't hit it over the head with a nail, but it was certainly there. Not completely unlike the volleyball game in Top Gun. Part of it's just there for window dressing, but part of it's really there. Meanwhile, the film's director, Jack Shoulder, has stated that he never talked with anyone about this gay subtext while making the film, though he's not against this reading of the film. Overall, it seems that Nightmare on Elm Street 2 wasn't intended to have gay subtext, but through various factors, it ended up having it.
There's this weird guy on Channel 9 this fall, and I guarantee he'll give you nightmares. His name is Freddy something or other, but immediately following Freddy, I'm back. Now, if I'm Mistress of the Dark, and Freddy's gonna give you nightmares, I would think twice before falling asleep Saturday night. Remember, don't miss A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Nightmare, and me, Elvira, Saturdays beginning at 10 p.m. Nowhere else but Channel 9.
Peter Jackson's A Nightmare on Elm Street 6. One of the most well-known canceled Nightmare on Elm Street films is the original sixth film, and it's really only known for one reason, and that's the fact that it would have been written by Peter Jackson, who would go on to direct the Lord of the Rings trilogy, King Kong 2005, and the Hobbit trilogy. His script was about Freddy being at an all-time low, having almost no power at all. In fact, teenagers from Springwood would literally travel to the Dream Realm on a regular basis just to beat Freddy up. Though this wouldn't last, and Freddy would gain his power back, which meant that he needed to be stopped again. There was also going to be a cop in the film who was in a coma inside of the Dream Realm. This cop would be the father of one of the teens who travels to the Dream Realm to beat Freddy up. New Line Cinema weren't happy with this script, most likely due to the fact that it was very clear that this film was going to be a meta-commentary on how people viewed the Nightmare franchise by this point in time, with Freddy not being scary anymore. And so they rejected the script. Last thing that I'll mention is that it's been reported that the film's title was going to be The Dream Lover. The Goldbergs. The Goldbergs was a sitcom that ran from September of 2013 to May of 2023, and was created by Adam F. Goldberg, and the idea behind the show was that it was a fictionalized version of his childhood. At first glance, the show has absolutely nothing to do with Nightmare on Elm Street, outside of the show taking place in the 80s. Well, that was the case until Season 6, Episode 5, Mr. Knifey Hands. Airing in October of 2018, this episode was about Adam wanting to watch the original Nightmare on Elm Street. So he does, and he gets pretty scared. But that's not why this episode is notable for Elm Street fans. This episode marks, at the time, the final appearance of Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. In the episode, the character Beverly has a dream in which she faces off against Freddy Krueger. The makeup on Freddy isn't great because it's a joke bit in a comedy show, but it's clear that Robert Englund was having a blast reprising the role.
I don't care what happens to me. I'm already living my worst nightmare.
Huh? I thought I was doing a pretty damn good job here.
No, you're great. Adam said he wished I wasn't his mother.
Oh, jeez, that's an awful thing to say. I'ma kill him.
No.
Why did Freddy wait 5 years? So the original Nightmare on Elm Street takes place in 1981, and the second film takes place in 1986. At first glance, this is nothing. But think about it. At the end of the first film, Freddy was very clearly still active, but by the events of the second film, Freddy is back to being a mystery, meaning that Freddy hasn't been active in the 5 years between films. So, what happened? Why did Freddy take a 5-year break from his rampage? This has led to a couple of theories, but the most widely accepted theory is that at the end of the first film, while Freddy was still active, he wasn't at full power. In fact, he was probably pretty weakened by the events of the film. And because we know that Freddy's powers grow when people are scared of him, it's possible that he purposely let himself become an urban legend again in order to make people scared of him again, allowing him to become more powerful. The only problem with this theory is that we see him growing more powerful throughout the events of the second film, but I guess you could argue that the scenes of Freddy gaining power in 2 were just the final steps in his plan, and that he got most of his powers back off-screen. But you could also argue that this theory doesn't really make much sense, as killing people is the easiest way to spread fear, as shown in Freddy vs. Jason. So, I don't know, maybe Freddy was just lazy between films. Original casting. Just like every other film ever made, some actors just didn't make the cut when they auditioned for roles in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. That, or they declined a role offered to them. Here's a list of some actors who either auditioned for roles, or offered roles, or were considered for roles, but for whatever reason, didn't end up getting the part. For Freddy Krueger, Robin Williams, Kane Hodder, and David Warner were considered for the role. For Nancy, Jennifer Grey and Demi Moore were considered for the role. For Glenn, Charlie Sheen, Nicolas Cage, Brad Pitt, and Kiefer Sutherland were considered for the role. For Jesse, Christian Slater, Michael J. Fox, and Brad Pitt were considered for the role. For Kristen, Winona Ryder was considered for the role. For Alice in Part 4, Ellie Cornell was considered for the role. For Freddy Krueger in the remake, Steve Buscemi and Billy Bob Thornton were considered for the role. And finally, for Nancy in the remake, Amanda Crew was considered for the role. Comics. Nightmare on Elm Street is not just a film series, as it's had a surprising amount of comics released over the decades. The first Nightmare on Elm Street comic was published by Marvel in 1989 and written by Steve Gerber. This series sees Freddy taking on a teenager named Allison Hayes and a doctor named Julian Quinn, who are, at first, tormented by Freddy, only for the pair to literally fight him. This comic isn't considered canon to the films, as it has a lot of continuity errors with both the films released at the time and the films released after. In 1991, Innovation Publishing would acquire the Nightmare on Elm Street comic license, and published 12 comics released in 3 miniseries, 2 of which were original stories, while one of them was a direct adaptation of Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. After that, Freddy would take a very long break from comics. He would return in 2005 in 4 comics published under Avatar Press, only for the Nightmare rights to be bought by Wildstorm Productions, which I believe still own the comic rights to this day. Wildstorm would publish an ongoing Nightmare on Elm Street comic series before replacing it with a miniseries after 8 issues. And finally, Freddy was the star of 2 massive crossover stories titled Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, which served as sequels to Freddy vs. Jason. I talk about these comics in the Friday the 13th Iceberg. Sadly, after this storyline, Freddy hasn't returned to comics. Freddy's Nightmares. Releasing from October of 1988 to March of 1990, Freddy's Nightmares was an anthology horror TV series taking place in Springwood. Unlike the Friday the 13th series, which didn't have Jason in it at all, this show actually did feature Freddy himself. Not only did he serve as the host of the show, introducing viewers to the stories, but he also showed up in some of the episode's plots. Most famously, the show's first episode, No More Mr. Nice Guy, which is a direct prequel to the Nightmare on Elm Street film series, as it's all about Freddy being arrested for his killings while he was alive, and how he ended up being let go, which led to the parents of Springwood taking justice into their own hands. This episode was actually directed by Tobe Hooper, the creator of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series. Unfortunately, that was really the only major Freddy appearance in an actual story. The rest of his appearances in stories were much more minor. The only episodes that even came close were an episode in which the daughters of the man who killed Freddy are haunted by Krueger, and there was also an episode in which a dude tries to date a goth girl who's obsessed with Freddy Krueger. While the show started out as an anthology series, during its second season, the show would actually start to connect its stories with recurring characters. They were able to do this because, as I mentioned, every episode took place in Springwood. Some episodes included one in which a tabloid news reporter discovers that his fictional stories are coming true, a fast food employee who's depressed gets pretty hyped when the restaurant gets robbed, a couple discovers that their adopted kid might actually be evil, and a man has dreams about a second Springwood killer, the Springwood Chopper. The show also featured appearances from actors who were already big at the time, and actors who would become big stars in the future, including Brad Pitt, Jeffrey Combs, Phil Lewis, Shiri Appleby, Bill Moseley, George Lazenby, Bill Camp, Lori Petty, and Raymond Cruz. And of course, Freddy himself was played by Robert Englund. The show received average enough reviews at the time, which led to the show to almost be left behind by the franchise, as, to this day, it's never gotten a Blu-ray release. Hell, it's never even gotten a complete DVD release. The only DVD release of the series had its second and third volumes cancelled due to poor sales of the first. Original Nightmare on Elm Street 3. One of the original ideas for Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was that Freddy was going to travel to the real world and attack the people responsible for creating the previous two Nightmare on Elm Street films, while they were producing a third Elm Street film. Not much else is known about this idea, as it never went very far into development. As you can probably tell, this idea was something that Wes Craven really liked, and this idea would be revisited half a decade later in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So why did this idea get rejected in the 80s? Simple. New Line Cinema didn't like it. Probably because of how out there of an idea it was. Which, to be fair, I kinda get. Like, a meta-sequel being like the 7th installment, that makes sense. A meta-sequel being the 3rd installment just seems a little bit too soon. Commodore 64 game. Contrary to popular belief, the NES Nightmare on Elm Street game wasn't the first Elm Street video game. The actual first Elm Street video game was released in 1989 and released for the Commodore 64. Titled A Nightmare on Elm Street and directly being based on Part 3, The Dream Warriors, the game has you playing as one of 5 characters from the film, Kristen, Nancy, Will, Roland, or Taryn, as you travel around Springwood in search of a way to take down Freddy Krueger for good, while also saving Joey. Developed by Westwood Associates, the game is similar to overhead RPG-style games from the time, like Gauntlet. You travel around Springwood looking for weapons and keys. These keys allow you to open various doors, which lead to maze-like rooms filled with enemies, like skeletons, slime monsters, ghosts, and haunted wheelchairs. And of course, Freddy, who is a boss in the game. The game was also available on DOS, and this version is a bit different. It's far more detailed and is way more colorful. The final boss of the game is also different. In the Commodore 64 version, Freddy is a giant, while in the DOS version of the game, he's in his snake-like form. The game got alright reviews, but it was overshadowed by the NES game, which has led to the game being forgotten to time. As to which version of the game is the better one, the Commodore 64 version or the DOS version, most people seem to agree that the DOS version is far superior. New Nightmare is just a dream. So this is a really weird theory. When Nancy dies in Nightmare 3, Kristen tells her that she'll put Nancy into a beautiful dream. Some people believe that this was actually Kristen giving Nancy a brand new life in a matter of moments via a dream in order to comfort Nancy as she died. This dream being Wes Craven's New Nightmare, with the idea being that Nancy lives through Heather Langenkamp's whole life up until the events of New Nightmare, in which, well, the events of New Nightmare happens. I personally think that this theory is pretty bad, because it doesn't really make any sense. I get making her believe that she's a famous actress and that Freddy was simply a fictional character, but why would Kristen have the demon pretending to be Freddy show up in the dream? Wouldn't that go against the beautiful dream line? I suppose you could argue that the demon's appearance in the dream is a result of, like, I don't know, the dream demons or Freddy attempting to take away Nancy's peaceful dream, but I don't buy it. I don't think this theory works. A Nightmare on Elm Street NES prototype. The NES Nightmare on Elm Street game was originally supposed to be very different. Instead of playing as the teenagers battling Freddy, you would have actually played as Freddy himself, taking out the teens as they try to find his bones. This version of the game was only ever advertised in a 1988 issue of Nintendo Power. It's never been stated as to why the game was changed so radically, but the most common theory is that it was a mix between two different factors. The first was that this was going to be released on a Nintendo console, and Nintendo probably weren't cool with a game being about playing as a demonic serial killer. And there's also the fact that older slasher games in which you play as the killer, like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, didn't sell very well due to many stores refusing to sell them. So changing the game up may have been a financial decision. Regardless, this version of the game was never released. It's theorized that a prototype build to the game exists somewhere, but nobody knows who could even have a copy of it still, so it'll probably stay lost forever. David Leslie Johnson's Nightmare remake. After the critical failure of Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, a sequel was cancelled, and a few years later, in August 2015, it was announced that another remake was being developed, this one being written by David Leslie Johnson, and for 4 years, this film kinda had development. Only half a year after the remake was announced, it was announced that the film was in development hell, which is always a great sign, and it would be revealed in December of 2018 that the remake was still in development hell. And finally, in September of 2019, the remake was cancelled, as the rights to the franchise reverted to Wes Craven's estate. So, why was this remake in development hell? It's actually pretty simple. The Conjuring Cinematic Universe. According to Johnson, in December of 2018, the remake was being put on the back burner by New Line Cinema due to the studio wanting to focus its horror efforts on the Conjuring Cinematic Universe. The only other information we have about this remake is that Robert Englund confirmed that he wouldn't be returning to play Freddy, but he was interested in cameoing in the film. Instead of reprising the role, Englund actually revealed an actor that he thought could make a good replacement for him, Kevin Bacon. Freddy Krueger Hotline. In the late 1980s and early 90s, there was a phone number that you could call and actually talk with Freddy Krueger. This was a 900 number. These hotlines were premium phone services that you had to pay for, and once you did, you'd hear a pre-recorded message. These were very popular back in the day, with hotlines being available for all sorts of stuff, like Santa Claus, Hulk Hogan, and
It's the freak phone, and here's the party freak. Freddy Freaker, dancing new sensation, grabbing the nation, doing the freak. Call now, 1-900-490-FREAK, $2 a call.
And of course, Freddy Krueger was one of these hotlines. If you called the number in the ads, you would begin a trivia challenge with Freddy, with one of the prizes being making a cameo in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Other prizes included a makeup artist, David Miller, showing up at your house and giving you money, and a Freddy Krueger makeover on Halloween night, and the ability to attend the 3rd Horror Hall of Fame award show, though later incarnations of the Freddy hotline were a lot more interesting in my opinion, as you could actually talk to Freddy, and later you would actually hear horror stories with Freddy introducing each story. Luckily, the horror stories have actually been archived, though if you're expecting to hear a bunch of lost Robert Englund Freddy Krueger dialogue, think again. Robert Englund wasn't the voice of Freddy in these calls. It's unknown who voiced him, but we know in the commercials he was played by Wally Wingert. If you're wondering how much this hotline costed, it changed depending on the year. In 1987, it was $1.50 for the first minute, and 35 cents for every additional minute. In 1988, it was $2 for the first minute, and 45 cents for additional minutes. and in 1989 and 1990, it was $2 for the first minute and $1 for additional minutes. This hotline was quite the nightmare for your wallet. Should also clarify that these hotlines don't work anymore. Do not call them. Cancelled Nightmare on Elm Street in 3D comic series. Nightmare on Elm Street in 3D is a cancelled comic series from 1989. The series was planned to be written by Andy Mangels, and would have been released in 3D, thus the name of the series. The idea behind the series was that the first 5 issues were going to be adaptations of the first 5 films, with the issues afterwards being original stories. Though the adaptations would have brand new scenes based on deleted scenes from the films. However, the series was cancelled for unknown reasons, though it's been speculated it was due to poor sales of the first Marvel Nightmare on Elm Street comic series. The only other thing we know about this series is that issue 6 was going to be a prequel about Freddy before becoming a demonic dream demon, and this story would try and fix inconsistencies with Freddy and the dream world that are seen in the films and the show Freddy's Nightmares. Nightmares on Elm Street. Releasing from September of 1991 to July of 1992, and written by Andy Mangels, Nightmares on Elm Street is probably the most well-known Nightmare comic released under Innovation Publishing. Unlike the previous Marvel comics, this series is actually considered canon to the film series, at least to a certain extent. The series is notable for serving as a finale for Nancy, Alice, Neil, Jacob, and Yvonne. Yup, Nancy is back. Kinda. Nancy is still dead, but her ghost shows up to save her old college roommate, Sybil, from Freddy, who's been haunting her as Jack the Ripper in her nightmares. Well, I say ghost, but technically that's not entirely true. Nancy's physical body was killed in Nightmare 3, but that beautiful dream that Kristen sent Nancy into is actually a portion of the dream realm that Freddy can't access, and so her soul has been hiding out there ever since. So she's kind of a ghost, but kind of not? I'm just gonna call her a ghost. Nancy, Sybil, and Sybil's unborn daughter battle Freddy, and, they lose. Sybil eventually dies. Probably should explain that unborn daughter thing, though. Turns out, in the dream realm, there's a place where a bunch of unborn children dream, and they somehow know who their parents are gonna be, so Sybil's unborn daughter shows up to help her. The series then jumps to after the events of Part 5, in which Alice and her son Jacob travel back to Springwood. There, Alice meets back up with Yvonne, while Jacob goes over to his dad's grave with a woman named Devon, who's working for Freddy. Jacob has a bunch of mind powers and tries to revive his dead dad, but fails because Freddy still has his soul. That and, like he's dead, like he's a corpse. What did Jacob think was going to happen? He's going to rise from the grave as a zombie? Freddy then decides to manipulate Jacob and to try and convince him to help him escape Springwood with his mind powers. He then sends Devon out to kill Alice. Meanwhile, Alice and Yvonne team up with Nancy's ghost to save Jacob from Freddy. In the process, Alice is sent into the dream realm, where she has to go through an Alice in Wonderland-like world with Nancy, Neil from Part 3, who's in a coma and his spirit is in the dream realm, and the ghosts of the Dream Warriors, Roland, Jennifer, Will, Taryn, and Philip. Yvonne kills Devon, which leads to Devon entering the dream world to help Freddy, though eventually she realizes that Freddy was manipulating her, and so teams up with Nancy, Alice, and crew to stop him. The story ends with Freddy being defeated, and Neil decides to stay in the dream realm and has Jacob's father's spirit possess his body in real life. And so Alice, Jacob, Jacob's daddy, who's now possessing Neil's body, and Yvonne live happily ever after. Freddy is Nancy's father theory. A pretty dark theory suggests that Freddy is actually the biological father of Nancy. There's not really a ton of evidence for this theory, outside of the fact that Marge has one of Freddy's gloves, though you can easily chalk that up to Marge having one of Freddy's gloves as a way of having a trophy of sorts after killing Krueger. People also claim that Freddy is hellbent on tormenting Nancy more than anyone else in the film, with the idea being that he wants to do this because of their connection, but this doesn't really work when Freddy's dead, the final nightmare exists. Not only do we see that Freddy actually had a daughter, Maggie, but he doesn't want to kill her, at least at first. Instead, he wants her to work with him. So why wouldn't Freddy want Nancy to work with him? Why would he punish Nancy for existing, but not Maggie? It doesn't really make any sense. Keep her awake. Remember how I said the NES Nightmare on Elm Street game was the final Nightmare video game? Well, that wasn't technically true. In 2010, in order to promote the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, a web browser game titled Keep Her Awake was dropped online. This game was extremely simple, as it was basically a glorified interactive movie. As you watch a girl desperate not to fall asleep, it's your job to keep her from falling asleep and being killed by Freddy Krueger. But there's no way to win the game, she will eventually fall asleep, with the idea being that you could then share how long you kept her awake with your friends, and compete to see who could keep her alive the longest. Some of the options to keep her awake had her drinking coffee, exercising, watching TV, taking medicine, and hurting herself is all I'll say. Yeah, that was something you could make her do. The game was available for a very short amount of time, most likely due to the very controversial gameplay mechanic that I just mentioned. The game itself is completely lost outside of 2 screenshots. No videos of it seem to exist online, and nobody knows where the clips played in the game are archived. We don't even know who the actress is in the game. And since this game used Flash, the game is most likely lost forever. That is, until today, kinda. While working on this video, I received a Vimeo link from a viewer of mine named Lunalord. The link led to a video of the game in action. With just under 60 views, this video was uploaded 15 years ago. The clips reveal that there's a meter on screen that goes up. If it gets full, then you'll fall asleep and die. These clips also reveal that the Freddy nursery rhyme is played throughout the entire game. There's also a shower scene where we almost see the actress's breasts. Finally, there's an option that just lets you go to sleep. Basically a I give up button. This video also reveals that a company named Ralph is responsible for the game, or at the very least, the footage used in the game. Shout out to Lunalord for sending me this link. I'll drop a link to the clips in the description below. Freddy vs. Jason Hell Unbound. Want to hear something that's gonna make you mad? We almost got a Freddy vs. Jason video game. The game would have followed an original plot about Freddy and Jason being trapped in hell. Both of them want to escape, so the Grim Reaper decides to play a game with them. He would create recreations of Springwood and Camp Crystal Lake, and have a bunch of demons chill out in them. Freddy would be sent to Springwood, and Jason would be sent to Camp Crystal Lake. Whoever killed the most demons would win, and be allowed to return to Earth. There would also be various bosses in the game. For example, if you played as Freddy, you'd have to fight a live Jason from Fridays Part 2 through 4, and Pamela Voorhees. And if you played as Jason, you'd have to fight various mutated Freddy variants, like the Freddy Snake from Part 3. The game was planned to release on consoles like the Dreamcast, Xbox, PlayStation 2, and PC. With the game also being designed to have multiplayer functionality, the game was pitched and would have been written by David Bergantino, and the game never ended up happening because Freddy vs. Jason just took too long to come out. Freddy vs. Jason went through development hell, and it's a miracle that it even came out, especially with how good the movie is. And because the game was supposed to release the same day as the film, when the film kept getting pushed back, that meant development on the game also had to be pushed back in order to make the release date. And this simply just took too long, and Hell Unbound was cancelled.
Foolish friends, Freddy Krueger is on your phone. Dial this number now. I've got some tales to tell. Freddy's favorite bedtime stories. Dead time stories. All brand new. Straight from my boiler room to your home. It's Freddy Krueger on your phone. So dial this number now if you dare. Tell him Freddy sent you.
$2 the first minute, 45 cents each additional minute. Children, get your parents' permission before you dial.
Robert Englund was almost not in future films. It's really hard to imagine somebody other than Robert Englund playing Freddy Krueger. Well, we almost got that in the second film. In fact, the original plan was that Freddy was going to be played by some random new dude with every film. They even shot some of Nightmare 2 with this idea. Yep, for the first 2 weeks or so of filming Nightmare on Elm Street 2, an actor who's never been named was hired to play Freddy. However, his acting wasn't very good, with his body movements being described as lifeless and being like Frankenstein's monster. And so, Robert Englund was brought back. Funny enough, you can actually still see one small scene of this pre-Robert Englund Nightmare 2 in the final film. During the shower scene, there's a few seconds where it's the original actor and not Englund. Julie was originally an agent of Freddy. Julie from New Nightmare is one of the most memorable characters from the film due to her death. But she was originally going to be memorable for a completely different reason. An early draft of the film had Julie be the secondary antagonist of the film. In this version of the film, the demon pretending to be Freddy would have used her as an avatar of sorts. Basically, he would use her to, spy on people and help out during his kills. She was still gonna die, though, being killed by the demon upon not needing her anymore. Julie's character was changed because Wes Craven believed that Julie being an innocent person just trying to do good and protect Dylan would make her death far more tragic and impactful than if the demon simply offed her because he didn't really need her anymore. The original Final Nightmare ending. Originally, the ending to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, wasn't going to be so definitive. Right after Maggie does the infamous title drop, we were supposed to see the Dream Demons finding a new host, which would have set up a sequel, a Nightmare on Elm Street film in which Freddy Krueger wasn't going to be the killer. Thank God that didn't happen. Oh right, thank God that did happen. Anyways, the ending was changed because the studio wanted to actually put the series to bed, as Part 5 had a crazy box office drop from Part 4, which indicated that people just were getting tired of the series. That and the studio itself wanted to focus on other projects. A Nightmare on My Street. In August of 1988, Will Smith and his band DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince released a song titled A Nightmare on My Street. The song follows Will and friends as they go and see the original Nightmare on Elm Street film in theaters. Afterwards, Will is haunted by Freddy, who tries to get Will to help him steal the souls of Will's friends. But Will refuses, and Freddy goes on to take their souls by himself. The song is notable because New Line Cinema wasn't very happy with the song. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince hadn't asked permission to make the song, and so New Line Cinema sued the band's record label. Luckily, Will Smith and his friends seemingly won out, as while the song was very clearly about Nightmare on Elm Street, technically, they never say Nightmare on Elm Street, or Freddy Krueger. In fact, they just refer to Freddy as Fred. So even though it was very blatantly a song about the film series, and it even sampled some of the Nightmare on Elm Street theme song, they could argue that it was parody, or something. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. Regardless, they settled this out of court, and the song was allowed to be released, just with a disclaimer that it had nothing to do with Nightmare on Elm Street. There was also a music video produced for the song that features a copyright-free Freddy Krueger. The music video was actually supposed to be deleted by the record label as part of the lawsuit, but somehow a copy of the video was leaked online. Gotta be real, the song's super cheesy and dumb, but I love it. It's so fun. Original Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was originally going to be very different. For starters, Dan was supposed to survive in the film for much longer, and would have found out that Alice was pregnant, and would have had scenes where he argues with his parents about the kid. Greta, Mark, and Yvonne were originally characters named Jen and Ginger. Ginger was similar to Greta, though she would survive much longer in the film. Her death would have had Freddy turn her into a giant fat pig monster at Club MTV. She would then wake up and Freddy would show up again, revealing that she was still in the dream, and, then Freddy would kill her. Mark and Yvonne were originally the same character, that being Jen. They were going to be a sassy artist who made sculptures. Her death would have had Freddy turn her metal statues to life and kill her. Freddy's backstory was also going to be shown in full in the film. We would have seen him be put up for adoption, and how he was bullied, which led to Freddy wanting to become a killer. Speaking of Freddy, Amanda Krueger was originally supposed to have a much larger role in the film, and more attention would have been made on the fact that Freddy was speeding up Alice's pregnancy. Yeah, this was actually a thing in the film, if you didn't realize. Only a single line from this draft survived in the final film. It's the one where it's mentioned where the baby is a bit large for the first trimester. The time travel Nightmare on Elm Street 4 script. In yet another scrapped Wes Craven Nightmare on Elm Street film, after the release of Dream Warriors, Wes Craven created his own pitch for a fourth Nightmare on Elm Street film. This pitch was going to involve time travel. Yes, time travel. We don't know too much else about this rejected pitch, outside of the fact that time travel would have been done through people going through each other's dreams. Shortly after rejecting Wes Craven's pitch, New Line Cinema approached Wes Craven and asked him to rewrite the script that had been chosen for Nightmare 4, but Craven refused. A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Beginning. Releasing in 1992, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Beginning was a 3-issue comic miniseries that served as a sequel to Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Yeah, the story called The Beginning was actually going to take place after the 6th film. Written by Andy Mangels, the story is about Maggie still having nightmares about Freddy. So in order to better understand her dead demon father, Maggie and Tracy from Part 6 travel back to Springwood in order to do research on Freddy. Basically, to find out how he came to be. But they soon realize that, Freddy's still somehow kind of alive. They then travel to Freddy's house, where Maggie gets visions of Freddy being abused by his stepfather, and in retaliation, Freddy kills his stepdad and buries him in the basement. And that's when the Dream Demons came to claim him. Freddy's dead stepdad would then attack Maggie and Tracy, and the Krueger house would collapse. The two would then follow Maggie's visions of Freddy's trial and eventual murder. And upon witnessing Freddy being burned alive, Maggie begins to glow, and then turns to dust in the real world. And then nothing. The story ends. Remember how I said that this was a 3-issue series? Well, it was supposed to be. The third issue was never completed due to Innovation Comics filing for bankruptcy. Luckily, Andy Mangels uploaded the script of the final issue online, so we know how the story ends. The story would have continued with Maggie waking up in hell in some kind of womb. She would then be ripped out by Freddy, who reveals that he's back because Maggie accidentally somehow rebuilt him. I guess by living through Freddy's memories, he came back to life. Tracy would then show up to help Maggie, and then the rest of the script is blank, except for the final page. So I guess we don't actually know how the story ends. The final page reveals that Freddy would have either won or escaped, and he would begin to mentor a new killer, with the final line of the comic being, "The cycle continues." Freddy was originally going to be innocent in the remake. In one of the dumbest creative decisions of all time, originally, Freddy Krueger was going to be revealed to be innocent in the 2010 remake. Yeah, the serial killer who hunted children, who also in the remake is implied to have done more than just killing, was actually innocent, and the kids were just lying about it. Why they thought this was a good idea is anyone's guess. But if I had to guess, it was probably just an attempt at being edgy. Like, whoa, we're gonna make Freddy the Adobe portable document format like he was going to be in the original film before Wes Craven changed his mind. But we're also gonna say that he was actually innocent and the kids were making everything up. We're really creative. We have ideas. This is gonna blow people's minds. We're smart. A film about kids, like, lying about somebody, and then that person dies and becomes, like, a dream killer or whatever, that could, like, work on its own, I guess, but, like, Freddy Krueger's already been established to be a serial killer in, like, 8 movies prior, so, like, why are you changing it now? Whatever, moving on. Rick's original death. Rick Johnson's death in Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was originally going to be very different and far more brutal. Instead of battling Freddy Krueger in a Dream Realm dojo, he was supposed to be killed off while falling into an endless abyss. When he was in the elevator was supposed to break apart, revealing the endless void below him. This scene was ready to go, and was even drawn in the film's storyboards. But there was one teensy little problem. You see, films are usually filmed out of order, and so Nightmare 4 was also filmed out of order. And by the time they got around to filming Rick's death, they had already blown the budget, meaning they couldn't do this death, as they didn't have the funds to create the elevator being destroyed effect. So they went with the cheaper solution, him fighting Freddy Krueger in a dojo. Krueger, the first kills. In the early 1990s, there was a script going around in New Line Cinema that was going to be a prequel to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Titled Krueger, the First Kills, the film was going to be about 2 police detectives hunting down Freddy Krueger prior to Krueger turning into a dream demon. The detectives were described by Robert Englund as bumbling, but they would eventually catch Krueger at the end of the first act. The rest of the film was going to be a courtroom drama of sorts, as we see Krueger being put on trial for his crimes. We know that during the trial, lawyers would have blamed the parents for their children's deaths, claiming that they were alcoholics and drug addicts. And because those bumbling detectives forgot to do something, Krueger would be let off on a technicality. The film would have then ended with Krueger being killed by the parents. The only other things that we know about this script is that it would have been filmed like a documentary, and New Line Cinema really wanted John McNaughton, the director of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, to direct the film. They really wanted the film to have the same tone as that movie. The film never ended up happening for unknown reasons, but many suspect it was because executives were worried that people wouldn't care about Freddy if he wasn't a supernatural serial killer. And also, they were kind of getting tired of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise at that point. Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff. I can't believe I'm actually talking about this. In October of 2014, Freddy Krueger was added to the mobile game Family Guy: The Quest for Stuff, a free-to-play freemium game in which you rebuild Quahog from Family Guy. Funny enough, Freddy's appearance in the game was during a Ghostbusters event, meaning that this is the closest Freddy Krueger has ever come to crossing over with the Ghostbusters franchise. Which is wild, because these two IPs could seriously have like an awesome crossover comic or something. Freddy wasn't the only horror icon added during this event. Jason Voorhees also showed up in the game, and there was even unique tasks that you could make Freddy and Jason do if you had both of them in your town. Oh, and a Xenomorph and Predator were also in this event. Dream Warriors was banned in Australia. Despite being one of the best Elm Street films, Dream Warriors wasn't actually available to watch everywhere. For example, the film was banned in Queensland, Australia for a few years. And it's not for the reason you probably think. It wasn't because of any blood or gore in the film, but instead, it was banned due to the scene in which Freddy kills Taryn with drugs. This was deemed inappropriate and potentially hazardous. Luckily, the film wasn't banned for too long, as 3 years later, in 1990, after years of people in Australia requesting for it to be unbanned, the Queensland Film Board of Review was abolished, which allowed the film to be viewed in Queensland. Novels. Freddy's antics haven't just been in films, shows, and comics. The Nightmare on Elm Street series has actually had quite a few novels released over the years. Obviously, you have the novelizations of the films, but there's been a lot of original stories released under the Elm Street branding as well. For instance, the novelization of Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Yes, the Dream Warriors novelization, published by St. Martin's Press, wasn't actually a novelization of the film. Instead, the book took plot elements and characters from the film and used them to create its own story. The two most famous examples of Nightmare on Elm Street novels are the two different original book series. The first being Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror, which released from November of 1994 to October of 1995. This was a series of 6 books written by Bruce Richards and David Bergantino. Despite the novel covers featuring the demon from New Nightmares, the demon itself is not actually in the books. Instead, Freddy is in the books, but only to introduce the stories. Yeah, these books are basically Goosebumps mixed with Freddy's nightmares. This, by extension, means that the books were made for a younger audience. Next, we have what fans dub the Black Flame series. Named after the publisher Black Flame, an offshoot of Games Workshop, this was a series of 5 novels released from May of 2005 to July of 2006, and were written by numerous different authors. These books were aimed at older teens and adults, and to take place after the events of Freddy vs. Jason, meaning that the original Nightmare and Friday franchises have a split timeline of sorts after their crossover film. These books included plots involving Freddy getting a protege, a new anti-insomniac drug that sends people into the dream realm, Freddy battling a kid who can control and prevent dreams from happening, and Freddy making the jump to the internet. I think the craziest thing about these books is that the second book, Dreamspawn, refers to Freddy as an anti-hero. No, Freddy's just a straight-up villain. What are you talking about? He's a serial killer? The Carnival of Carnage. In October 2007, as part of Universal Studios' Halloween Horror Nights event, a Nightmare on Elm Street haunted house debuted in Carnival of Carnage, the name of that year's Halloween Horror Nights event. This haunted house was titled A Nightmare on Elm Street Dreamwalkers. If guests entered the haunted house, they would be met with Sleepwell, an anti-insomniac drug that sends people into the dream realm. You'd be hit with a blast of Sleepwell mist, and be met with the Elm Street house. Guests then enter the house and are met with various recreations of scenes and locations from previous films, including the original film, Dream Warriors, The Dream Master, and Freddy vs. Jason. Eventually, guests would find themselves in the boiler room and would have to escape Freddy, who'd be chasing them. 8 years later, in 2015, Freddy would return to Halloween Horror Nights alongside Jason Voorhees. In fact, this haunted house was called Freddy vs. Jason. Yup, a Freddy vs. Jason tie-in 12 years after the film released. The idea behind this haunted house was that this was a sequel to the film, and had the two horror icons facing off against each other while guests explored Elm Street and Camp Crystal Lake. While very clearly being modeled off of Freddy vs. Jason, there were references to other Freddy films, such as Dream Warriors. Video rental promo video. In 1987, a rather strange official piece of Nightmare on Elm Street media was... well, it wasn't released per se. This piece of media is a promotional VHS tape that was created to promote Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, but not to the public. Instead, it was created to advertise the film to video rental stores, who would go on to buy copies of the film so that they could sell them and, by extension, profit off of the sales. The promo video goes over reasons as to why they should invest in the film, these being the fact that the first two films sold great, and America loves Freddy Krueger, or as the Diet Freddy Krueger says,
"Tell them about America's insatiable Freddy fetish!" Ah!
Right.
The reason why this promo VHS is so interesting is that, well, as you just saw, Freddy Krueger shows up in it. Basically, it's Freddy selling his film to video rental stores, along with in-store banners, wall posters, 3D posters, and floor displays. There was even a contest promoted in which winners could appear in Nightmare on Elm Street 4. Freddy also roasts Robert Englund for some reason.
This is the one I use.
I do all the work, and look who sponges up all the strokes. That spineless crustacean of an actor, Robert Englund. Go on, Bobby. Schmooze with Joan, baby. What do I care? I've got a hit video on MTV.
It's a really unique piece of promotional material because they really didn't have to do all of these Freddy skits, since the general public were never meant to see this tape. Blood. The 1997 first-person shooter horror game, Blood, features plenty of Easter eggs and references to other horror franchises, and Nightmare on Elm Street is one of these horror franchises. For instance, you can find Freddy's fedora and sweater hung up on a wall in the level's castle and Charnel house. But the more interesting Easter egg comes in the form of a cheat code. If you use the cheat code Krueger, the player will be given 200% health, but will also be set on fire, an obvious reference to how Freddy died. References to Elm Street continued into the game's sequel, Blood 2: The Chosen, released in October of 1998. In the level Steam Tunnels, you can find Freddy's boiler room, which also has Freddy's glove hanging up on a wall. Scrapped issues of Freddy Krueger's A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Marvel comic series Freddy Krueger's A Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't supposed to be a 2-issue miniseries. It was actually supposed to have at least 6 issues. The plan for the cancelled issues would have concluded Allison's initial storyline, though she would return after a few issues in a recurring role. We also know that Freddy would have gotten some kind of antagonist. We don't know too much about this antagonist, but it can be assumed that they were either going to be a rival killer or a good guy trying to stop Freddy. We know that the 3rd issue of the series was supposed to follow Freddy trying to convince a girl to stay alive, and that life was worth living, but after that, we don't know any specific plot points. There was also supposed to be a 6-page short story written by Peter David that would have been released alongside the comic's 5th issue. And finally, writer Buzz Dixon had suggested to Marvel that they should have a request page in the comics that would allow readers to send in letters requesting who Freddy should kill in the next issue. It's never been officially stated by Marvel why the series was cancelled, though many people believe it was due to poor sales. However, while that is a possibility, the real reason might be lamer. According to Steve Gerber, who was the head writer for the series, the comic was cancelled thanks to anti-violence in media advocacy groups. Articles were beginning to pop up claiming that violence in comics was getting out of hand, so Marvel got cold feet and cancelled the series. But it's possible that this may have not actually been the reason, and that the reason was somehow even lamer. According to Tom DeFalco, former editor-in-chief at Marvel, Marvel's at the time president Jim Galton was the reason why it was cancelled, because he didn't believe that Marvel should be publishing stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street, believing it to be morally wrong. So, was the comic, and by extension the 3D series I talked about earlier, cancelled due to sales reasons? Because of activist groups? Or because of a weird moral issue coming from Marvel's president? Honestly, it's probably a combination of all of them. Paranoid and Fear Book. Releasing from 2005 to 2006, A Nightmare on Elm Street Paranoid is a 3-issue miniseries written by Brian Pulido. The series is about the people of Springwood finally figuring out how to defeat Freddy Krueger for good. They're able to defeat him using a new drug called Hypnocil. Yeah, the drug from parts 3 and 4. The story begins with a girl named Claire having a nightmare in which Freddy attacks her. She wakes up and it's revealed that Hypnocil is a drug that the parents of Springwood have been secretly giving to their kids in order to suppress their dreams. So, how did she dream? Simple. The shipments of the drugs are late, so they're out. Her father warns her not to tell people that Freddy's still around, as he doesn't want Freddy's powers to grow. Shortly afterwards, a girl named Tia has a nightmare involving Freddy, and this results in her dying. Claire's father comes clean about the drugs, which doesn't exactly go over well with Claire, so Claire gathers her friends to figure out a way to defeat Freddy, only for her friend Donna to die during the meeting. And her death is a pretty big deal, because Freddy lured her out in her dream into the middle of the road, which results in the truck containing Hypnocil to crash and explode, destroying the latest batch. One by one, Claire's friends and acquaintances are hunted down by Freddy, which in turn spreads fear, which makes him stronger. Freddy gets a bit cocky though, as when Claire is briefly knocked out, she grabs Freddy and brings him into the real world while in prison, and the story ends with Freddy being arrested. Except not really, it's a trick. She doesn't actually do this. But it'd be really funny if that's how the story ended, Freddy getting arrested. Instead, while in the dream realm, Freddy shows her that her dad accidentally killed her mom with sedatives. Claire then battles Freddy in the dream realm, and eventually is able to bring Freddy out of the dream realm during a high school basketball game. Freddy kills Claire's dad, and then everyone there starts shouting that they're not scared of Freddy. That, combined with Freddy being shot, and the ghosts of his victims attacking him, Freddy is finally defeated. But he comes back 6 months later and kills Claire and her boyfriend. In June 2006, a one-shot sequel comic to this miniseries was released, titled Fear Book. This story takes place a little bit after Paranoid. It's a new school year, and the teens of Springwood are back on Hypnocil, but this time willingly. In order to figure out a way to get back into Springwood, Freddy recruits the spirits of Claire and her boyfriend to help him, but obviously they refuse to help. But just then, a robbery occurs at a gas station. Things don't go to plan, and one of the would-be robbers is nearly killed and ends up in the dream realm. And this happens to the rest of the robbers one by one during the standoff with the police, thanks to some quick thinking from the hostages as they drug the robbers with sleep aids. And so the story ends with the hostages and the police being pretty okay with Freddy taking out the criminals. Jesse's Lost Journal. Released in February of 2012, Jesse's Lost Journal is a rather strange book. It was self-published by Mark Padden, which means that the book isn't actually canon to the films, nor is it owned by New Line Cinema. As the name suggests, the book is Jesse's journal, but not in the way you think. In the world of Jesse's Lost Journal, the Nightmare on Elm Street series is an in-universe film series and are dramatizations of real events. So the journal is the journal of the real Jesse, whose story was told in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And so this journal is the real story of what happened to Jesse, the story that Hollywood was too afraid to tell. And after this, we get some information on Jesse's life after being tormented by Freddy. He's tormented by Freddy again, but this time in New York City. Also, the real Freddy Krueger ends up possessing the real Robert Englund. The book is honestly probably the most explicit entry in the Nightmare series. For example, it's mentioned that Jesse's father, Ken, is a predator and did things to Jesse's sister, Angela. And Coach Schneider is shown to be a predator, even more than he was in the film. It's also mentioned that Freddy, while possessing Jesse, shoved a stick up Schneider's behind. Other plot details include Jesse and Lisa having a kid, though Lisa raises him by herself, and when Jesse moves to New York City, he changes his name. How the Nightmare on Elm Street all began. This is a rejected Nightmare on Elm Street prequel film, written in 1987 by John Saxon, who played Lieutenant Donald Thompson in both the original and third Nightmare films, along with playing himself in New Nightmare. The film, as the name suggests, was going to tell the true story on what happened to Freddy Krueger, and how he became a demonic slasher villain. The film would begin with Thompson's oldest daughter, Betsy, running away and joining a cult. Thompson brings her home and decides to look for a therapist for Betsy. That therapist being Freddy Krueger. During her visits to Krueger, she reveals a whole bunch of stuff, like how she wants to do violent stuff thanks to the cult, and how she's also in love with her father. Anyways, Krueger's pretty alarmed by all of this, and tries to contact Thompson, but Thompson refuses to meet with Krueger because he's busy investigating a serial killer. While this is all going on, Betsy gets addicted to LSD, and she even drugs her own father. Krueger is eventually able to meet with Thompson, but it's when Thompson is drugged, and so Krueger, being the stand-up guy that he is, brings him back to his home. There, Betsy starts lying about Krueger and claiming that Krueger had drugged her and attempted to R-word her. And Thompson nearly beats Freddy to death, but luckily Freddy is able to escape. The next day, Thompson is freed from the influences of the drugs. He continues his investigation and discovers that one of the recent murders was a girl who had been seeing Krueger. So he starts to believe that Krueger is the killer and shows up to his office. Freddy tries to explain that Betsy isn't exactly well, but Thompson isn't hearing any of it and threatens to kill him. And that's when Betsy is killed. So Krueger is arrested and questioned, and it turns out that he's not only a child therapist, but he's also an author who's been trying to write a book about kids growing up in the 1960s. There's no evidence that he's the killer, so Freddy is released, only to then be butchered by Thompson and the rest of Springwood. Freddy's innocence is then confirmed when eventually a girl turns herself into the police and reveals that she was the real killer, along with a bunch of other people. Turns out that cult was responsible for all of the murders. And the film ends with Nancy having her very first dream of Freddy Krueger. So why was this film rejected? Probably because of two reasons. One, everything involving Betsy and Thompson is insane. And two, Freddy being innocent is just not a popular idea.
Just when you thought it was safe to fall asleep, Freddy Krueger is back in a 1-hour special, Elm Street, a Halloween nightmare. We'll take you behind the scenes on the filming of A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 and expose the secrets of those incredible special effects. So join us right here, because Halloween was never this scary until now.
The series got sillier because Freddy got bored. This is probably my favorite Elm Street fan theory. So Freddy's an unkillable demon serial killer, so he's gonna eventually get bored from just doing the same thing over and over again, since, he can't die, at least permanently. So in order to spice up his post-mortem life, Freddy decides to get sillier with his kills. This is why in the earlier films, his kills are more scary and less goofy, whereas with later films, they get more goofy and less scary. The theory is essentially an in-universe explanation as to why the series got goofier over time. This theory has never been confirmed, but there's nothing that debunks it, so I like to consider it canon. The 1994 Northridge earthquake. New Nightmare was always going to feature an earthquake as part of the film's plot. However, what nobody expected was for an actual major earthquake to happen during the production of the film. On January 17, 1994, an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7 hit California, which resulted in 57 deaths, 8,700 injuries, and up to $50 billion in damages. While people mourned their losses, New Line Cinema was like, hey, let's save some money. So the studio had people drive around the aftermath of the earthquake and record footage of it. This allowed the crew behind New Nightmare to use footage of a real disaster, instead of having to create fake earthquake footage. Rooney Mara almost quit acting because of the remake. Rooney Mara, who played Nancy in the 2010 remake, wasn't a very big fan of the film. More so, she wasn't a fan of making the film. In an interview done about a year after the film's release, Rooney revealed that she had actually not wanted to star in the film. She just showed up one day to the audition because, why not? And accidentally gave an audition that was too good, which landed her the part. And she hated the filming process. She's never gone into very much detail about the filming of the remake, but she said, quote, I didn't want to act anymore. I was like, this isn't what I signed up for. If this is what my opportunities are going to be like, then I'm not interested in acting. So I was very discouraged and disheartened. So it's very clear that she hated working in the project, and this almost led her to quit acting. And she might have, if not for being handed the script for the 2011 adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which reignited her love for acting. And speaking of that film, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is canon to the remake. In 2018, Reddit user Perseus Andromeda came up with a fan theory that connected the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake with the 2011 Girl with the Dragon Tattoo adaptation, a film based on the book of the same name, and is unrelated to the Swedish film trilogy also adapting the books. So why does this Reddit user think that the films are connected? Simple. Rooney Mara plays Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street, and Lisbeth Salander in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The theory goes that after the events of the 2010 film, Nancy's mind is shattered due to all of the trauma that she's experienced over her life, and so she takes a real-world medication called histone deacetylase inhibitors, which mostly removes all of her memories about her trauma. But there's still some lingering memories in her brain. She then moves out of the country to Sweden in order to escape her past, and she changes her name to complete her new identity, and those lingering aspects of her trauma are reactivated when she's attacked by a man named Miguel, which reminds her of Freddy's attacks. And because of her abuse at the hands of Freddy, she developed some kind of Oedipus syndrome, which led her to start loving Miguel. So, is there any truth to this theory? No. For starters, a sequel to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was in development for a period of time, and this sequel would have adapted the second book in the series, which goes over Elizabeth's backstory. This means that the producers on the film had no intention of her backstory being Nancy. Also, I don't think that medicine can remove memories. I'm not a doctor or anything, but I don't think that's how that works. Correct me if I'm wrong, which I probably am. Overall, no, I don't think there's any strong evidence to suggest that Nancy and Elizabeth are the same character. Real nightmares. People tend to forget these days, but for a time, Freddy Krueger was everywhere. Everyone loved him. There were toys of him, costumes of him, countless pieces of merch of him. In the late 1980s, you couldn't get enough of Freddy Krueger. One of these attempts at cashing in on Freddy's success was a game show titled Real Nightmares. Except this was not made during the primetime Freddy boom. No, this was actually made in 2005. So, a little late to the party. In the mid-2000s, CBS greenlit the show with the idea that Freddy Krueger would be the show's host. Freddy would take the contestants' fear and make them confront it head-on in various challenges. And best of all, Robert Englund was going to be playing Freddy. Now, you're probably thinking, wait, isn't this just Fear Factor? And, yeah, kinda. In fact, Fear Factor is actually part of the reason why Real Nightmares never ended up airing. Despite 6 episodes being filmed and presumably being completed, CBS began getting worried that there were already too many crazy challenge-based game shows on TV, such as Fear Factor. Plus, there was some behind-the-scenes drama about the show's tone, with CBS wanting the show to be a gross-out challenge show, while the show's producer, Star Price, wanted the series to be a more challenge-based psychological horror series. And so, the series was cancelled, and the 6 episodes filmed remain somewhere in a New Line cinema vault. Freddy Rules. One of the earliest drafts of Nightmare on Elm Street 5 is a script titled Freddy Rules. Written by David Show, it's unknown if this was the working title or the final title. Some of the things that we know about this draft include the fact that Alice would have teamed up with Nancy's extended family. Yup, Nancy's uncle and his family were going to show up in the film. The uncle's name was going to be Arthur Thompson, and he would have been Donald's brother. His son, Jamie, would be in a coma throughout the film, which would lead to Jamie meeting Alice in the Dream Realm. Arthur would have also connected with Alice via the Dream Realm, though, like Nancy, Arthur wouldn't survive this film and would be killed by Freddy, who was dressed as a motorcycle cop. His other kids, Marcus and Neela, along with their friends Ben and Georgia, would have teamed up with Alice in order to fight Freddy, and by the end of the film, would have become a kind of makeshift family. The script also included a piece of lore that was cut from the franchise, called the Coma Pit. This was a section of the Dream Realm that even scared Freddy. What was in the Coma Pit? I have no idea, but Freddy was going to be defeated by being dragged into it by Jamie, Alice was also going to be pregnant with twins, and it would have been implied that Jamie reincarnated into one of these kids after sacrificing himself to defeat Freddy. Finally, we were supposed to see black and white footage of Freddy prior to him becoming a demonic killer. It's unknown why this script was rejected, but the script impressed New Line Cinema enough to let David Cho write dialogue for Nightmare 5, only for none of his lines to actually end up in the final film. Tommy Gilbert. Born in January of 1940 and passing away in November of 2015, Tommy Gilbert was a professional wrestler from 1969 to 1984, though he would continue to wrestle on occasion afterwards. At first glance, Tommy has nothing to do with the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but in the late 1980s, Tommy began to wrestle on occasion under the ring name of Freddy Krueger. In order not to get sued, he would change his ring name to Nightmare Freddy, though he was still dressed up like Freddy Krueger, glove, burns, and all. And he was far from the only dude pretending to be a horror character during wrestling matches. There was also a Leatherface, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Frankenstein, Wolfman, and even a Crypt Keeper. Anyways, Tommy didn't play Freddy for too long, though his run as Nightmare Freddy inspired his son Doug Gilbert to take up the glove. Doug's incarnation of Nightmare Freddy eventually made its way over to Japan, and up until the late 2010s, Nightmare Freddy, played by Doug Gilbert, participated in a ton of Japanese wrestling matches. Though he still could be wrestling under the name Nightmare Freddy, I'm not entirely sure, correct me if I'm wrong. Disney's Nightmare on Elm Street. When Wes Craven began pitching Nightmare on Elm Street to studios, you may be surprised to learn that New Line Cinema wasn't the first studio that he contacted. The first studio that he contacted was Disney. Yes, Disney. I don't really know why he thought that Disney would be cool with producing an R-rated horror movie about a serial killer who kills kids, but Wes Craven pitched the idea to them. Surprisingly, Disney wasn't entirely against producing it. They just weren't happy with the gruesome kills. So they told Wes Craven to tone down the violence, and if he did, then they would produce it. But Craven refused, and pitched Nightmare on Elm Street elsewhere. Freddy's in love with Joey. So here's the weirdest theory in the video. There are some people who believe that Freddy Krueger is in love with, or at the very least, physically attracted to Joey from parts 3 and 4. This may sound like a very random theory, but there is some evidence for it. That being the fact that in both parts 3 and 4, Freddy attacks Joey by disguising himself as a woman and attempting to seduce Joey. And he doesn't do this with any other male victim, it's just Joey. But this theory is ignoring what the nightmares are supposed to be. Rick's a martial artist, so he had a nightmare in a dojo. Debbie hated people pushing her around, and she loved to work out. So she had a nightmare where Freddy pushed her to continue lifting weights, despite not being able to lift them. Mark loved comic books, so he had a nightmare where he was put into a comic book. Spencer loved video games, so he had a nightmare where he was put into a video game. The nightmares that people have in the series are reflections of their personalities. Joey's a bit awkward and has a hard time talking to women, so Freddy showing up as women trying to seduce him was a reflection of this. Freddy wasn't attracted to Joey. Funko Savage World. In 2018, Funko released a new line of figures titled the Savage World line. This series included figures based on Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Thundercats, but the figures that I want to talk about are the ones based on horror IPs, particularly slasher films, and Nightmare on Elm Street was one of these franchises. Released alongside figures based on Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, Pinhead, and Michael Myers, Freddy, along with his slasher friends, are extremely jacked. Freddy in particular looks like he's literally ripping out of his clothes. He's also got a scarecrow-like hood, which is a pretty neat touch. These figures were intended to be reimaginings of the characters in a 1980s barbarian toy style, like Conan the Barbarian or He-Man. My favorite one of these is probably Michael. I don't know why, it's just his arms are really funny to me. Should also mention that Leatherface has a chainsaw arm, which is something that I'm shocked the series has yet to do. Freddy's Funhouse. After the release of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, there were a bunch of ideas thrown about for a third Elm Street film, and one of these ideas was from Robert Englund himself. Englund's been pretty secretive about what his pitch was, but luckily we do know a few things about it. For starters, it was going to be called Freddy's Funhouse, and the film would focus on Tina's sister as the protagonist. The film would begin with her away at school, having nightmares about what happened to her sister, and so she travels back to Springwood in order to find out the truth behind Tina's death, which would lead her into entering the now-abandoned Elm Street home, aka Nancy's house. And this house had literally become Freddy's Funhouse, as Englund described it as a booby-trapped nightmare house, and that Freddy's twisted mind had turned it into a demented carnival or funhouse. The film would also delve into Freddy's past a bit, and we would have seen a newspaper photo of Freddy being released from court after he was let go. Tina's sister wouldn't be the only lead character. Englund had wanted a Cambodian parapsychologist to be the male lead. The ending of the film would have had a big fight against Freddy, as the characters would tell each other what they saw in their dreams, so they would hide weapons so that they could use them in the dreams to fight Freddy. And that's pretty much all we know. According to Englund, the script was rejected simply because New Line Cinema didn't like the script all that much, outside of the fighting back against Freddy in the Dream Realm idea. Bloody Rage. Released in September of 2002, Bloody Rage is a fan-made crossover video game using Flash. Now, most crossover fighting games have, like, a connection. Like, they're all Nickelodeon-owned characters, or they're all Shonen Jump characters. Bloody Rage does not have a connection with its characters. We have Spider-Man, Optimus Prime, Blade, Goku, Yoda, Jason Voorhees, Wolverine, Scorpion, Bruce Lee, Hulk, Superman, Cloud Strife, Lara Croft, Ken from Street Fighter, and, of course, Freddy Krueger. The game has a lot of neat little things, like a character customizer, a bunch of goofy cheats that make the characters bigger or smaller, and fatalities. I honestly only included this game in the Iceberg because of how insane the roster is. Side note, this game did 2 Gloved Freddy before Mortal Kombat. The Scream franchise is canon. So some people like to claim that the Scream series and the Nightmare on Elm Street series take place in the same continuity. The reason for this is because they're both slasher franchises created by Wes Craven. So, is there any truth to these claims? Any evidence to suggest the theory is true? No, not at all. Sure, there's Easter eggs related to Elm Street in the Scream series, but that's all they are. Easter eggs. In fact, A Nightmare on Elm Street is directly mentioned by name in the series, so it literally cannot be canon. But this is where I bring in a secondary theory. If A Nightmare on Elm Street isn't canon to Scream, is New Nightmare canon to Scream? Think about it. The Nightmare on Elm Street series is a series of films in both New Nightmare and Scream. And New Nightmare is never mentioned by name in the Scream series. There is an Easter egg related to it in Scream 3, but it's not an acknowledgement of the film existing. It's just something that happens in New Nightmare happening in Scream 3. And we see Wes Craven alive in Scream 3, well and happy. which he would be if the demon or entity from New Nightmare was defeated, like it was in the film. So there's not really any actual evidence to suggest that they're in the same continuity, but there's nothing saying that they can't be. The Dream Demons never existed. So we know that the Dream Demons exist in the Elm Street series. I mean, we literally see them. But there's a theory that they didn't used to exist, and they only exist because of Freddy's delusions. The theory goes that Freddy, while alive, was crazy, and had delusions of demons telling him to kill people, and when he was being killed by the parents of Springwood, his spirit became attached to the dream realm because he had some latent dream powers that he didn't know about. And while in the dream realm, his subconscious used the dream powers to create the Dream Demons, since Freddy already believed them to be real. While a creative theory, I think it's a pretty weak theory. Look, I'm not a big fan of the Dream Demons either, but this theory doesn't really make them better. In fact, it kinda makes them needlessly complicated. I guess you could believe this theory, but I don't really know why you would. The Nike SB Freddy Krueger Dunks controversy. In 2007, in order to pay tribute to Nightmare on Elm Street, Nike announced that they were planning on releasing sneakers called the Nike SB Dunk Lows. These sneakers were colored just like Freddy Krueger's sweater and featured random splats of red, which were intended to be blood. Fans of the series were pretty excited, but you know who wasn't excited? New Line Cinema. They felt that this tribute to Nightmare on Elm Street was breaching their copyright, and so they sent a cease and desist on Nike. So Nike stopped production on the shoes, and they were never released. Except, they kinda were. Some shoe stores in Mexico had already sold a few pairs prior to the recall, and there's rumors that a Nike employee stole a few pairs and sold them. Regardless if that rumor is true or not, you can buy these sneakers. They're just gonna cost you $24,000. I'm not like a sneaker enthusiast or anything like that, but like I feel like these shoes are a bit too ugly to be $24,000. Julian Maury and Alexander Bastillo's Nightmare film. After it was announced that Nightmare on Elm Street would be getting a remake in 2010, many different writers were in talks to helm the film, and in 2008, Julian Maury and Alexander Bastillo were in contact with New Line Cinema about directing the remake, and they had a very interesting idea for the remake. For starters, like the final film, they would have Freddy be directly confirmed to be a, well, you know. And, well, I'll just let them describe what their pitch was. Quote, "So the idea was to have a twisted version of the Goonies, with a bunch of kids being stalked. We thought it'd be a great idea for a remake to switch the teenagers of the original with real kids. Childhood is the moments in life when you are truly and deeply frightened by nightmares, when you're not able to see the difference between reality and dreams." So basically, they would have had actual child actors play the characters, instead of 20-year-olds playing teenagers. This pitch was most likely rejected because horror movies are already pretty iffy on showing kids dying. Off the top of my head, the only films that I can think of doing that are the 80s Blob remake, Hereditary, AVPR, It, and Halloween 3. So I'm pretty sure an entire film where Freddy would be stalking kids was something that New Line Cinema wasn't okay with doing. The Dream Police. One of the earliest drafts of Nightmare on Elm Street 6 was titled A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, The Dream Police. Written by Michael Almerida, the film would have followed up on the plot threads of Part 5, with Alice and Jacob returning, only for Alice to be killed almost instantly. No, really. Once Freddy makes himself known, Jacob says that he and Alice will defeat him, so Freddy just straight up executes Alice in front of him. And just before Freddy can finish Jacob off, that's when the Dream Police show up. They wake him up, and Jacob tries to find himself a new home, now that his mom is dead. Eventually, he finds an orphanage and decides to live there. He then makes a bunch of friends there, and, well, you know what's gonna happen. Freddy's gonna show up and to kill most of them. Jacob tries to warn everybody about Freddy, but Freddy has, no joke, somehow, eaten Springwood. Like, the entire town is gone, wiped from the world and the minds of those who inhabit it. Jacob ends up having nightmares again, and is once again saved by the Dream Police. And it's revealed here that the Dream Police are actually Joey, Kincaid, and Taryn from parts 3 and 4. Yup, after their deaths, they were somehow recruited into this Dream Police organization. Your standard Nightmare on Elm Street film happens from here on out, just with some Dream Police fight scenes sprinkled in. The final act has the Dream Police, Jacob, and the surviving teens team up to battle Freddy in a Dream Realm version of Springwood. During the fight, Joey and Kincaid are killed, and Taryn explains to Jacob that the Dream Police can't actually kill Freddy since he's already dead. The only one who can kill Freddy is Jacob. As Jacob goes in search for something to kill Freddy with, Taryn is killed. Finally, Jacob and his last surviving friend create a dream version of Freddy's foster father, and he beats up Freddy, eventually killing him. And that's when it's revealed that, surprise, Joey, Kincaid, and Taryn didn't actually die again. I guess they're immortal. Upon defeating Freddy for good, Springwood is returned to reality and the day is saved. Keshka I Freddy. Keshka I Freddy, aka Keshka and Freddy Krueger, is a comedy short film released on Belarusian television in 1992. Directed by Boris Berzner, the film follows a kid named Keshka who decides to skip school in order to watch the fifth best Elm Street film, Part 4, The Dream Master. At the theater, he somehow falls asleep and awakens in a nightmare where he's alone in the theater. He's soon confronted by Freddy Krueger, who asks Keshka if he knows how to speak English. See, Keshka was supposed to learn English at school today, and so Keshka responds that he can't. So Freddy attacks him, and Freddy probably would have ended up killing Keshka if not for the Soviet Union, as Keshka recites the laws of the pioneers of the Soviet Union. This somehow weakens Freddy, and Keshka is able to defeat Freddy, and even takes his hat with him as a trophy. Upon waking up, Keshka says that he's gonna spend more time at school learning about English, and the film ends. But not before some shady dude comes in and talks to the kids real quick. Pretty sure this is the same guy who plays Freddy in the film. Now, as you can probably guess, this was not officially licensed by New Line Cinema. Despite this, New Line Cinema, as far as I know, never took any legal action against the creators of the film. And that'll be it, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs out there. That was the Nightmare on Elm Street Iceberg. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's a little shorter than usual, but I mean, shorter videos for me is like 2 hours, so it's still a pretty lengthy period of time. But hope you guys enjoyed. It's always fun doing a little horror icebergs. I think I said in the Friday the 13th iceberg that like there were still some Jason versus or Freddy versus Jason scripts that I didn't talk about, and I was gonna save for this video. I don't really know what I was talking about there because I like looking into the Freddy vs. Jason scripts. I talked about pretty much all of them in the Friday the 13th iceberg. Maybe I missed one. Or maybe I missed one or two, but I couldn't find one. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like and comment, you know, all that kind of stuff. If you got to the end of the video, leave a comment below saying like 1, 2 Freddy's coming for you or something like that. if you're like, if you want to get really into it, you can do the whole nursery rhyme, but you don't have to do that. Just do the 1, 2, Freddy's coming from you, or coming for you, not. Uh-oh, that would be bad. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. And I've said like 10 times. I don't think there will be an Iceberg in November. There will be in December. I'll see if I can squeeze one in November, but I don't. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. No promises. But the December one will be. There will be a very big one in December, and it is a highly requested one that people have been asking for quite a while. I'm actually gonna release. I actually have a trailer release like made for it, and I'm gonna release it on November 1st as like a little trailer. So check. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. I guess on the Twitter, my Twitter account, channel Twitter account, not my personal one. They'll be on the channel one. That's linked in the like above, like I mean you know where it is. You know where it's linked. And I also have a community tab now, so you can just like post stuff. You can comment. You can post all kinds of stuff. Thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, I was gonna say hope you guys enjoyed again for like the 8th time. I think that's just like my default for like something I don't know what to say. Like it's like a stim almost. I don't know. But yeah, huge shout out you guys to my channel members. For $5 a month, you can get your name in the outro read aloud and get exclusive previews for Iceberg videos. Anyways, thank you to Maurice Deceased, Adam Depp, Digital Medic, Lone Thunder, Jordan Tubby, TJ's Hole, The Mr. Train Track, Cowboy Tuba, Solid Fricky, Steven, Killam, King Fenrir 1987, Wojtek Wojtkiewicz, Infinity Mark, Derry, Papega, Domeshot 529, Sailor Stell, Mano, J-Max Air, Fabio Borges Jacob, Guardian of Brooklyn, Notorious J, Paco, Dats J, Cody Lester, Milo the Mighty, V for Voltex, Nora, Goat449, Hunter Gentle, Metaphysical Loaf of Bread, Moxie, Games with Toasty, Jesse Aguilar, The Epic Rager, Nathan Trench, Big Falco 32, Velv, Titanoboa Hunter, and Alan Hamilton. Once again, I have to say this because it still genuinely just blows my mind that there are people out there who would support me. Like I thank you so much. I say it all the time, but your support means the world to me. I thank you. Just thank you. Now, with all that being said, hope you guys have a great one. Stay safe and all that. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Sweet dreams.
Hey, you forgot the power